This webinar is now being recorded for everyone. That way you can see it later on. I'll put the recording up on our membership section. You can watch it, see it as many times as you want, go over things you'd like to see, and so on. Okay. Now, one thing is really important, and this has to do with you taking care of yourselves. We're going to be talking about issues. Some of them are personal issues. Some of them are issues that are really adult and may trigger other people. That's always possible in something like this. And I, nor Sherry, nor anyone else here has any control over who you are, how you deal with things, how you may or may not be triggered. So obviously you take care of yourself. This is the best efforts basis in your behalf. If you do find yourself being triggered and you don't want to participate, go ahead, close it out. And you can watch the recorded webinar later where you can stop and start as you choose. Okay. All right. One other thing, we've talked in the past about having group sessions. Many of you want that. I want that. I think it's a great way to help learn this and practice this. It is in process. My webmaster is supposed to give me a first look at that sometime next week. So hopefully within the next month, we're going to have that up and running for you. That's not a guarantee. Okay, things happen much slower on websites than we would like to typically think. So now let me see. Let me unmute my dear co-host Sherry Baker. Say hello, everybody. To everybody.
Hi, Gary. Hi, everybody.
There you are. Okay. Sherry and I had a little discussion earlier this morning before this webinar started. And what I want to do before we actually get to your questions and answers, which is the centerpiece of today's webinar, is to go over a few things and, with Sherry's help, expand on some things because they will be foundational, I think, to what we're learning here. Now, I want to give you big gratitude because many of you gave me questions and answers in places where you're stuck and so on, regarding this whole process. And so that gave me a really good sense of where you are. And as you might expect, people are in a whole rainbow of different understandings of this process. Some are newbies. Some have been at it a while. Some have been at it a while and have actually kind of light training and don't even realize it's light training yet. So some of the stuff we're talking about seems to be more advanced for them than might have ordinarily. So I just want to suggest we're addressing all of those today. Now, Sherry and I talked about this morning one of the really fascinating things about this process, and that is its ultimate simplicity, and that is there is only one remedy for everything. I mean, that's a central theme in my book. Sherry, I assume you're supposed to agree with that. Do you agree with that?
Of course I agree with that.
But let's compare that for a moment in the conventional sense, and we'll use medicine as the conventional sense here since it's the most popular. How many ailments are there as identified by, let's say, the medical profession? Have you counted them?
Thousands and thousands.
Yeah, there's a whole thing called the DSM. I even forgot that count, but it lists all of them, and there's thousands of them. Okay, and is there not, from the conventional view, a remedy for each one? Like if you've got depression, how do you take care of depression? From the medical point of view,
you take an antidepressant.
you take a pill, right?
Pill.
And how do you take care of a headache from a medical point of view?
Well, there's a pill for that too, Gary.
And it's a different pill.
It's a different pill.
In fact, there's 2 or 3 kinds of pills.
Yes.
And there's several antidepressants.
Yes.
So we can use, if this antidepressant doesn't work, maybe this one will.
Correct.
All right. And if we have other ailments, there are surgeries or maybe diets or exercise things or some. There's a different. My point is, there's a different remedy for just about every ailment we can identify.
Yes, theoretically.
Well, yeah, and do they always work? Well, sometimes yes, they cover up symptoms nicely, and other times maybe not so. Maybe we even have side effects we don't want, and things like that. Okay. So we have one natural remedy for everything. You can take all the pills and all the surgeries and everything else, and you can put them in a basket and put them over in the corner because we have one natural remedy for everything. This is the same remedy for depression as it is for headaches, as it is for cancer, as it is for multiple sclerosis, as it is for panic attacks, as it is for dyslexia, phobias, and on it goes. Yeah?
Yes.
So when you deal with clients, do you use more than one remedy, or is that it? Sherry, that was a question. I'm sorry. I'm putting you on the spot. Go ahead.
One remedy. That's certainly with optimal EFT.
Yeah.
Remedy. And
okay.
What a relief.
Now, yeah, but does that mean we take other conventional means like medicine and say, oh, don't ever use it? Do we say that?
No, we do not. No, we do not.
Okay.
Wherever your consciousness is, if you feel like the pill is going to work, take the pill. Certainly our highest guidance doesn't want us to be in misery while we're trying to learn how to utilize that power.
Well, let me give an example of that, Sherry. Not too long ago, you were the delightful recipient of a kidney stone.
Yeah.
Did I say that well?
Those weren't that. I wouldn't have suggested that we use those words, but delightful recipient. We can go with it.
Well, I'm being facetious, but the point I want to talk about is you used unseen therapists for that and got temporary results. But the first thing you did was get in the car and go to the emergency room. Am I right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there they have things that we're not able to do yet with unseen therapists. Now, I shouldn't really say that because you did use unseen therapists.
Yes.
With Claudio, one of your certification students.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that for a minute.
Well, to be honest, I used EFT and unseen therapist to begin with, or I couldn't have even driven to the emergency room. So I did get relief with EFT, tapping and optimal EFT, which enabled me to even drive to the emergency room. And I just thought that would be wise to figure out what was going on. And
of course.
Yeah. So once we realized what it was, I realized that I needed to do some physical world things like drink a lot of water, we've got to flush something out. Something's there that doesn't need to be there. But my certification student, Claudio, we were scheduled to have a class, and I knew I wouldn't be able to sit for the class. And so he offered to help. And I said, well, this will be our class. We will do optimal EFT and figure out if there's an emotional sponsor to this. And I offered up whatever came, and he did his work at his end. And within a couple of days, it was over with. And I've talked to many people who say it can take up to several weeks to pass a stone, and it can be very uncomfortable. And with Claudio's help and the unseen therapist's help, I was able to pass what ended up being just a lot of what looked like dust. And Claudio said dust is kind of difficult for a stone to turn into. It might turn into little bitty pieces of rock, but it often doesn't just pulverize into dust. And so it left very easily. And we were both very thrilled with the result. And
well, along those lines, and we're digressing just a bit here, but we're going to get back to the central point. I too had a kidney stone, and I didn't know what it was, and that's one of the worst pains you can possibly imagine. I was full of ibuprofen, and that just took the edge off, and I went to the emergency room, and you knew about it, some other people knew about it, and started doing unseen therapists in my behalf, unbeknownst to me. And while I'm sitting in the waiting room with that kidney stone roaring and doing its worst, the pain absolutely stopped. And it just stopped from that point forward. They took an X-ray or an MRI and all that and found it, and there it was and everything else, but no pain. And when my passing, if you will, became dust as well. I call it grains of sand. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. But okay, but we're digressing there. But my point is, while unseen therapists can do things beyond what conventional means can do, often we're not at a point yet, typically, where we can just say, "Oh, don't bother with anything else." No. We're in sort of an in-between place. I wanted to make that point.
Right.
Now, there's also another metaphor that some members are familiar with and some aren't, but it's an important metaphor. It's another simplifying piece. And once this is understood and really understood and practiced and experience gained with it, it opens huge doors for how to address almost anything. Okay, and that's the tabletop and table legs metaphor. Okay, so whether or not you've heard of it before, let me go over it. Most issues we can, as people describe them, can be called a tabletop. For example, somebody may say, "Oh, gee, I'm easily rejected. Every time I turn around, somebody says something, my God, it just goes like that to me, and I get this big thud, and I want to cower around, and it messes up my social life and everything else." Okay, so that would be the tabletop. Now, if you think about a tabletop only exists, or I should say, is supported by table legs. No table legs, the tabletop collapses. Okay, so the whole idea of "I'm easily rejected" is a tabletop. It's sort of a global type issue. That's my issue. Okay. But one cannot feel rejected and have all of this somewhat over-the-top response to comments that might be rejecting in nature, unless there's been specific events in your lifetime that gives rise to that. Specific events where you were indeed rejected. The time your mother did this, the time the teacher did that, the time your brother did something else, the time your schoolmates did, all these other, the time you got fired, the time you got dumped by your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. All of these things are forms of rejection. They are specific events. They are like the table legs under the tabletop. So that's why we want to get down to specific events, because those specific events are not only things that happened, they also contain the emotional impact of those things that happened. So we use optimal EFT on those specific events. We start collapsing the legs one at a time. And as those legs collapse, that table has less support and less support. Okay. And if we collapse all the table legs, tabletops, and the whole idea about, "Oh, gee, I feel rejected easily," goes away, because there's nothing supporting it anymore. That's the point. Now, one of the questions arises, well, Gary, I've had 1,000 of these specific events, all about how my father abused me, for example. And my father rejected me, kind of thing. Well, okay, but so do I have to do all thousands of them? No. With a tapping form of EFT, we used to say you do 5, 10, 15 of them really well, and they tend to collapse everything else because they generalize over all the rest of them. So all the rest of them have commonality, same kind of people, same kind of circumstances, same places, same this kind of thing. And so they kind of generalize, and you do 5, 10, 15 well. Now, that's with the tapping form. With unseen therapists, and give me your thoughts here on this. Sure, this is my experience anyway. Sometimes we can only need to do one, and it generalizes over everything. Oftentimes more than one, but 2, 3, 4, do them really well, and it's hard to find the rest. Now, do you have a similar experience or not, Sherry?
Oh, I definitely have a similar experience. I definitely feel like it goes much faster. She seems to be able to reach across more events than we could with the tapping version of EFT. And she somehow gets it handled more thoroughly, whereas in tapping, we were really going over every piece of a particular aspect, even that had a lot of different pieces, and she can sort of smooth over those as well. So it's definitely, she can get to the harder things and more quickly, more easily, so that we don't have to come up with so many specific events.
Yeah, and we often, I find, we still have to come up with some more specific events often. And sometimes we've got to even get down to more details about a particular specific event, simply because these things tend to be more hidden, more outside the awareness of the person. They need to be put on the table because, again, unseen therapist is never going to interfere with your free will to believe as you choose. That's why we as practitioners here, our main goal is to assist the unseen therapist by counseling with a client or ourselves if we are the client and put this stuff on the table. Now, things we're going to be talking about today with various people will be issues that need to go on the table, generally speaking. That's where we're going here. So now, I want to say one other thing about that, and then we will, unless you have more to say, Sherry, we will move over into talking to some folks. And that is, how do you find, and this is a common question, by the way, how do you find the specific events for ailment X, ailment Y, different things? If it's not as easy as an emotional issue as like I'm rejected, how would you do it if somebody had a rheumatoid arthritis, for example? How do you know what specific events are under a given physical ailment in this case? Well, actually, oftentimes you don't, at least on the surface. But with experience, you can start asking questions like, well, when did your symptoms first start? Oh, 7, 8 years ago when something happened. Okay. And was that an emotional event about that time, or before that was an emotional thing? Oh, yeah, that's when my divorce happened, or that's when there was a death in the family, or that's when I lost my job, or that's when some other form of emotional stuff will occur. Now, that's a big clue. And so now you can start working on that, reduce that down to specific events, the time when whatever happened and so on. So that's the easy thing to do. Now, if you can't do that, then you can always revert back to what's in my book, and that is the personal peace procedure, 30 or more specific events. Just go line up all your specific events, whether or not you find them related or think they are related to your rheumatoid arthritis or whatever label you give to whatever you've manifested physically. You just keep doing a whole bunch of them, keep doing and doing them well, and as you collapse those, not only will your personal freedom, emotional freedom start to elevate, but to the extent those are also behind some of your physical ailments, the physical ailment, those symptoms will start to fade as well. Okay. Any more thoughts on that, Sherry, before I go on?
Yeah, that's what we do. We look at if someone has a physical issue, sometimes the issue itself comes with built-in clues as an emotion might be. I've worked with rheumatoid arthritis before, and the first thing I think of is a kind of a hardening, a stiffening, a rigidity. And so we were looking at places in the life where there might be some rigid thinking, and we absolutely came up with some ideas on that. And, we worked through it over a period of time. But sometimes, if we absolutely are stumped as to what could be sponsoring the physical ailment, we just look at whatever negative emotions exist, or long time angers and grief and fear. And sometimes that is sponsoring, and sometimes something else heals, something maybe I didn't even know about. A person didn't even share it with me, and they said, gee, something just cleared up. And I said, I didn't even know you had that problem.
Yeah.
And so we were releasing anything that didn't belong there, anything unlike love. We were releasing, and all sorts of physical things were healing, maybe not exactly the one that they had wanted, but, whatever was healing was certainly a welcome gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's one other thing I want to point out here, because I see it on my notes and forgot about it, but it's important. Let me ask you, sure, let's have a brief discussion on this before we're going to bring on Norma Beatrice here in a minute. But a brief discussion here, Sherry, the unseen therapist. She's sort of portrayed in my book, and the way we talk about her is like out there someplace, and we need to communicate with her out there. Something like people sort of generally think of God as being up there in heaven or something like that. But unseen therapist isn't out there, is she?
No, she's within us all. And so that's where we look, and you design the process where you say, close your eyes, get quiet, go within, and we embrace a loving moment. We're embracing her. That's who she is love. We're going to the place inside of us where she lives. And that's why we get quiet and go to that loving moment, because that's what's kind of knocks on her door to say, hey, we could use some help here.
Yes, and another way to say that is she is part of us. She is a spiritual power, if you will, that we all of us, I think, sort of recognize intuitively, but she's sort of buried beneath our belief in separation and all the stuff of the humanness and all the other stuff, sort of buried down in there. And so we sort of try to look outside ourselves for healing, physical healing. We go to outside therapists and outside doctors and outside this and that, pills, and those are all outside influences, rather than to go inside and get in touch with our actual healing power within. So the whole optimal EFT process, and the part about getting quiet and communicating with the unseen therapist, is really a way of unburying the unseen therapist within. And the more we do that, the more we do this and try this process, the more experience we get, the more successes that we get, even if we don't recognize them yet, by the way. But we watch other people get success, and we say, oh, there's something to it. We begin to develop this trust, and then we have our own success. Oh, a little more trust, a little more trust. The next thing you know, we're starting to climb our stairway to miracles, because we are gradually taking the wraps off of the unseen therapist that we have basically buried.
Correct.
How did I do, Sherry?
You did great, Gary, as always.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that in mind, we've had many questions about this process. And one of the questions came to me from Norma Beatrice. So Norma, let me find you here. Norma, where are you? Did you raise your hand? Oh, there you are. I'm going to unmute you, Norma. Speak.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Hi.
Good to see you. Okay. All right, we talked to you for a little bit last time on our webinar, and you introduced to us your version of the unseen therapist being a what?
Great big fuzzy orangutan. But since then, I've discovered that the orangutan is usually present when I am healing a childhood issue, because it's very soft and fuzzy. And I've noticed that if it's an older issue, she tends to be more what we would expect, more of a light being. So, yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think she doesn't want to frighten the child.
Well, whatever it may be, but understand, actually, that is your creation about what that is. Okay, but it's okay. You can call her a fuzzy, or what is it? A fuzzy
orangutan.
A big fuzzy orangutan. Yeah, I got that. Okay, now you wrote me this letter. You said you're dealing with some homebound clients, and they are clients in the main, if I remember it correctly, know little or nothing about EFT. I'm right about that?
Correct.
Yet they have.
I think I would freak them out if I brought it up. That oh, I have this technique I want to use with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do always is take the client where they are. And so the last thing we want to do is sit there and freak them out, so to speak, before we even start. I mean, that's called not getting rapport, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, you find yourself in a place where you can't say, "Oh, let's do these kinds of things." Okay. So what do you do?
Is that a question?
That's a question.
Well, what I've been trying to do, and I'm very, very new at this, trying this. So it's kind of unsettling to come from a place of working with clients who are very familiar with EFT, especially tapping, and who come to me for tapping and knowing what I'm doing, to feeling like I'm in this sea of confusion and uncertainty. So what will happen is that as they're talking, I will bring unseen therapist in to try and this aura of love. But the difficulty that I'm having as a beginner in this, they're talking, right? They're talking while I'm doing this. So I have to listen to what they're saying while at the same time trying to catch, okay, where's the aspect? What am I gonna work with here? And that's very difficult for me right now.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that happens with some frequency. Okay. In a way that's similar to how would you deal with a child who really doesn't understand this stuff on an adult speaking level? How would you deal with somebody in a coma? How would you deal with somebody, somebody's nephew who needs some work, and you don't even know them, and they live 10,000 miles away or something? So, I mean, it's a similar kind of thing. But in this case, this is an ideal place to do what we're calling conversational EFT, which, as you describe it, is what you're doing. The conversation is going on. I am presuming, although you didn't say this, that as this conversation is going on, the client is telling you about their problems. Mm-hmm. Is this correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as you're doing that, and again, you didn't say this, but I assume you can direct them as they talk about the problem. Like the problem is, I just feel so alone, and I made that up, okay? But then you could say, well, tell me, when was the first time you ever felt alone? That there's a specific event.
Uh-huh.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I can remember when I was 4 years old and what happened. My mother left and when I felt so alone. Okay. And as you're doing that, just consciously bring in unseen therapist. Now, what you were saying earlier is you may have some difficulty, really, when I say consciously, I probably should have used a different word. You're having some difficulty getting the exact aspect and all of this as you might do if your eyes were closed and you were zeroing in on something because you got all this chatter going on. But the unseen therapist is there anyway. I'm just invite her in. Talk with the client. Let them tell their event. Okay. And then one of the questions you ask me is, once you do this kind of thing, whatever you do, is how do I know if it's working? Or if I'm doing them justice, okay? Well, you don't always know, but let me give you some clues. So you're talking to the client. You're bringing in unseen. You're doing conversational EFT. I do this a lot, by the way. I have a lot of conversations.
I know, you do it very well. Yeah.
With a lot of people. Well, I practiced at it, okay? I've got a few years of practice on all this stuff.
Yeah.
As you're doing that, and this person then starts talking about their specific event, then as they talk about it, you might notice as they start getting into it, they're not so worked up about their specific event anymore, and they may choose to switch over to another specific event, okay, which is a clue to you that, we did something with the previous one. Then you can say, well, let's take this other specific event. Now tell me about that again, and you may hear something like, well, that's not as important as this one. or something like that, okay? Another way you can tell is you can come back the next day or next week or something like that. And you can say, okay, listen, remind me, what was that event again that you were talking about? I don't remember. What was that? Okay. So that's how you know. The unseen therapist doesn't send you a letter and says, dear Norma, Joe's fine now. Okay. How am I doing? Do you have any other questions about that? Did that help, Beatrice, or what?
Yes, it helped a lot. By the way, Beatrice is my last name, but that's okay. So no, that helps. I think I just have to lighten up and practice and just keep practicing it. It's because I keep using you as the standard, like, oh, gee, this didn't work the way I saw Gary Craig do it.
Well, okay, yeah, but thanks for that. But go ahead and use me as a standard. Use Sherry as a standard. Use others as a standard. Use the book as a standard. Use all the testimonials and all the examples. Use those as standards, because that puts them up there, so you're still climbing your stairway to miracles. And in time, you will be creating some standards, and you will be the standard in time. Okay, but all of this takes practice and experience. But a question like you just asked, very important, because there's a lot of people listening in here, some 57 people listening in who just got a clue about what to do, in circumstances like this. And Sherry, by the way, any of these things where you have a comment on it, please come forward.
I just want to say, Norma, you really hit it at the end when you said, well, I guess I just need to lighten up or relax. When you call upon unseen therapist, she will respond. And that's just a knowing that you develop over time. There's no way you call upon her and she's having lunch while you're here trying to help somebody. She's there, and she's going to inspire you as to what to say. You don't even have to think about, oh gosh, what's the procedure, the process? Am I asking the right question? Just follow whatever drops in to your intuitive sense of things, and trust that loving intention to help someone heal is very, very powerful. They will definitely reap some benefit, whether we see it in the physical world or not. Highly likely when your discussion is over, they'll say, gosh, I feel so relaxed, I don't even know why, And that's because anxiety and some type of negative emotion has lifted. And you may not see it in any other way, but you just trust something positive has happened. Some door, if nothing else, has opened to healing.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I would say on this is that this bit about unseen therapy is just going to tell you, that's a true statement. I mean, Sherry's statement is true. Whether or not you hear it is another issue. Okay, because we're developing our readiness to hear all these things. We have our own blocks, and the more we do this, the more we start to recognize our own blocks to hearing things. Also, the client may or may not, in the somewhat handicapped circumstances you're talking about, be putting as much on the table as we might like, because they may resist you getting into too many details and things like that. Okay, so you do your best here, but it will be maximized for whatever is available at the time. But the whole bit about trusting the unseen therapist, that does come with experience. Sherry trusts all the time. I trust all the time. I get some of the darndest things that come up that something I never remotely thought of, when I'm dealing with a client, and I ask a question and, oh yeah, there we are.
Well, and Gary, sometimes an experience comes to mind. We were trying to come up with a specific event, and I heard unseen therapists say, ask them about thus and such. And I thought, really? It just seemed so bizarre to me. And so I asked them the question, and we start talking, and all of a sudden they said, oh gosh, this reminds me of the time. And there came the specific event. I would never have thought to ask that crazy, seemingly has nothing to do with anything question, but I just did it because I heard it, and then the event popped up.
Okay, and what you did was you trusted it. Many people will hear it; it'll show up, but they somehow or other consider it too bizarre or whatever, and so they don't go with it. I on many occasions are dealing with a client one-on-one, and the two of us will close our eyes, we'll bring an unseen therapist for a specific issue, etc. And the client, not always, but with enough frequency to be important, will say, well, while we were in there, my thoughts shifted to something else. Okay. And there we are. There's unseen therapists coming in. Something they had forgotten about, never knew about, or whatever. It just showed up. Okay. The other thing is, for me, if unseen therapist is giving me something, she doesn't say the way you said it, Sherry, like, ask her about this. I don't really hear it that way. You may hear it that way. I don't hear about it that way. Just this kind of shows up. I get a little image or a name or something like that. So. Okay. Any other thoughts, Sherry? We'll go on.
We can go on.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Norma. That was very helpful. Now, Mariolina from Italy.
Yes.
You're there.
Yes, I'm here.
I know English is not your first language. You understand English really very well. But you and I had and so I thank you. I thank you for coming on. And you said we could call you yesterday anyway, or when we talked. You said I could call you Mary.
Yes, sure.
So, Mary, okay. Your question here. Oh, we talked about this rejection thing we talked about earlier. You and I talked about that, didn't we? We talked about many of these things.
We talked about the fact that I find it difficult to find an event to offer to the unseen therapist.
Okay.
We talked about that.
Can you give me an example of where you would have difficulty in finding an event?
Yeah. As long as I do the personal peace procedure, there's no problem because I have events, many events. But when I go on something more specific, like, for example, a physical issue that this is a specific one, but just to make an example, to make you understand, 2 weeks ago, I had a red spot on my leg checked by the dermatologist because they said maybe we have to remove it or not, and we don't know. And so, and then I said, well, I can try and work on it. Maybe ask the unseen therapist, but I didn't know from where to start.
Okay, but did you try?
Yes.
Okay, and what happened? Anything?
No, something happened, and it is maybe the thing that made me feel confused, because many things came to my mind, many events, and I said, "Oh, there are too many." And what was amazing for me, they were all kind of connected. You know, there was a kind, yeah. But as I told you, I'm just a beginner, so I was kind of, I said, oh my God, what's happening here?
Okay. Mary, excellent. I give stars here. You know, I'm going to give Norma a star or two, but I'm going to give you some stars as well, okay? Because if I heard you right, what you're saying is, as a beginner, you were trying to do unseen therapist for this red spot on your leg. And what showed up for you were several specific events that all seemed to be related. They just kind of showed up as you were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the unseen therapist talking to you, and that is you beginning to hear. I'm curious, when you started hearing that, did you say to yourself, "Oh, thank you, unseen therapist," or were you saying, "What's that?"
No, I generally tend to thank you, but it's it's my way of being. I've been doing that for years. When something good happens, I say, "Oh, thank you," just to, I don't know, the universe.
Uh-huh.
and so I did, but I was kind of confused. Maybe because I am a beginner and I still have to.
Okay, you were confused about what to do from here?
Yes, and I think if I can say, I don't know, it's just my feeling. There was this feeling of, oh my God, who am I to do this? I will not be able to do anything for my spot, for my red spot. So maybe my ego was getting in the way. I don't know, some resistance, and so.
Okay. Well, yeah, and thank you for that, because our egos, our resistance, our sense of separation gets in the way of everything. It's a player in all of this stuff. Okay, it's our belief in separation that even created all of these things, because as quantum physics tells us, and as I talk about in the book, and the other spiritual experiences people have, and so on, our true reality is a oneness that we are unaware of. Unseen therapist is our connecting link within all of us, so to speak. Okay, now, so let me address some of this. Okay, the first thing I would do is, maybe as a newbie, if I didn't know any specific events that I'm aware of that may be causing this red spot or whatever the physical ailment may be. Okay, I can aim at the symptom. I can just be quiet. Okay, I'll just simply aim at the symptom. Now, aiming at the symptom is, generally speaking, not the most efficient way to go about this. We want to go to cause. But that doesn't mean we can't aim at symptom and get some, at least temporary relief, and that's nice. And sometimes we can just aim it at the red spot goes away in a little bit, and so be it, okay? That does happen, and happens with some frequency. But is it the efficient way to go about and really get underneath all of it? Not generally, but start with that. See what happens. Maybe that will resolve it. Who knows? But and what happens sometimes, especially as you gain experience, is you do that, and then unseen therapist is telling you where causes might be. Specific events, for example. Okay. Now, you got those. You got a few of them. Okay. You had some resistance come up. Who am I to do all of this, and so on. I mean, you had that kind of response. So I don't know what you did with it, but those specific events are now specific events, and you can start doing your personal peace procedure on those specific events that are hopefully, presumably, underlying this red spot. It may be, because the unseen therapist is a lot wiser than we are, it may be that red spot is nothing, okay? And what is far more important than that are some other issues underneath, and she's pointing these out to you, okay? So you point those out, you do the unseen therapy, you do the optimal EFT process, the personal peace procedure on those, okay? But, that's... this, I'm going to repeat again. You talked about this issue of who am I to do this. This is a trust issue involved. In fact, it isn't you who's doing anything. It's the unseen therapist. And in fact, for all those, listen, for all those egos out there who are therapists who want to be the great therapist in the sky and be wonderful and say, everybody look at me and all the healings I do, you're in the wrong place. Because
the issue is I'm not able to invite her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, the proficient therapist, the proficient healing practitioner, is an assistant to the real practitioner, the real healer. We're very important because we're going to get stuff and put it on the table and so on. And having conversations like this is going to help people put stuff on the table. The unseen therapist just showed you some specific events to put on the table, and others have had a similar thing, and maybe they haven't heard yet, or maybe they heard and went, that's too bizarre, next. Listen. Okay.
Can I comment?
Yeah, please do.
Who am I to do this? We've all been there. Many of us may still be there. It's very common, especially upon newbies. The unseen therapist, I feel, would say to you, at this time, she has more faith and trust in us than we have in ourselves. And so until such time that we develop that trust in our abilities to bring about healing, she would say we could borrow her faith and trust. So when I first heard that, I thought, what does that mean? And I realized she's saying, I'm saying that you have the power to bring me in to heal. So go with that. Even if you don't believe it, you haven't had the experience to know that that's true, just believe it until such time that you do. And so I recalled when I started doing EFT many years ago, I was learning how to tap, and there was this guy named Gary Craig, and he had these DVDs, and he said, anybody can do this. And I'm learning how to tap, and I thought, I don't know if I can do it, but this man says I can. So what the heck? I'm going to go with that. And so I'm tapping away, and sure enough, I can do it. This man is right. Of course, the more experience I had, the more evidence I saw that it worked. So I think what Unseen Therapist wants is, at the moment, who am I to do this? She says you're able to do it now. So believe her and trust her until such time that you start to see evidence of it in your experience, and then you can then trust yourself. But it's a process, and it takes some time to develop that trust. So until that time, borrow her faith in you.
Okay.
And I would.
Thank you.
I would add into that. It's probably a challenge to just go believe the unseen therapist, or just because Gary says so or whatever, go believe it. I think while I understand the concept, I think I would use the phrase, accept the possibility that it might be true. Okay, you will believe and have trust that builds over time. Okay. All right. Let me see. Anything more you want to ask, Mary?
No, I don't think so. No.
All right.
No, we talked about the other issue, the other question, that I tend to trust standard EFT more at this point. But I think we already cleared everything.
Yeah, when you say standard EFT, you trust standard EFT, that meaning the tapping.
That thing, yeah.
And many people do, because this is new. This new process is new to them. Takes a new form of thinking and all of that. So it's expected that many people are going to want to revert back to or rely on or whatever tapping until they start to build their skills in the newer form. And I think what will happen is the tapping gradually will fade away and the newer skill will come to the forefront. Okay. All right, Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold on a second here.
Thank you so much.
Now let's talk to Sandra. Are you there?
Yes. Hello?
There you are. You and I had a substantial conversation the other day, did we not?
Yes.
And while I think what we did assisted you along the line of your questions and your issues, there was enough in there where I thought we would kind of revitalize that for the benefit of everybody. Was that not our conversation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So to start off with, in your letter to me, you said you've been using optimal EFT for a lot of things. I think you said, amazingly, you have progressed amazingly in the majority of my issues.
Yes.
Okay. But there's one I'm not able to resolve. And say what that was.
Well, it's public speaking, but in general, speaking.
But in particular, public speaking, and the way you worded it was when you didn't have solid knowledge of your topic.
Right.
I said that right?
Yes.
Okay. So
But
we
it's
go.
mainly when I feel judged. If I see
you
that
feel-
people are judging me, then even if it's, whatever topic, I get very nervous and then I start having, like I ramble or I forget my words and mispronounce.
So are you nervous now?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I asked you the other day if you'd be nervous, and I thought you said, "Oh, I don't think so."
Yeah. But now, yeah.
Well, actually, see what happened in that we got to talking about what appeared to be the issue, and that is your difficulty with speaking in front of groups, especially when you weren't comfortable with the knowledge that you had. But we talked about it, and we talked about it, and we ended up with a. I may not have said this in our conversation, but let's bring it up now if I didn't. A more core issue, and that is you don't want to be judged.
Right. Yeah, that's the part.
So the symptom of not wanting to be judged is to be standing in front of people and saying stuff. You have good knowledge, you stumble over your words, and you think people look at you funny or they're judging you. Or yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then we got to the fact that as a youngster you were bullied.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's a form of judgment. Would you say?
Yes. Well, I had 2 other events before when I was 5, and then I was bullied around 13.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, without going any further, I'm curious. We talked about this a few days ago, you and I.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a chance to start addressing any of the issues we did? And how is that issue now? Is it still the same, or you've not addressed it, or what happened?
Right. So now I'm understanding that it's more being judged, because before I thought it was only, when I didn't know the subject, but now it's in general. So I did Unseen Therapist with the 2 first events again to see, what was left. And so many things are gone. So I don't, react to the specific event, just in 2 areas for the 2 events are the same issues. But when I start, talking to people at work, I still have the same problems. Or I still feel the same. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. So now when you talk to people at work, you have the same problem. That is a form of a test, right?
Right.
Okay. And we always want to test our work. Always, 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 always. If we don't test our work, we don't really know how well we're done. And I got to get on my soapbox here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So many people, easily 90% of the people who do EFT out there have not gotten to the point where they understand really testing. They do something with themselves or with a client or something like that, and there is some temporary, that's better. And they think that's all there is. And quite often, that's just a surfacey little thing, and you've got to get underneath it. So you go back to work. All right.
Yes, I'm always testing.
Okay. So, yeah, well, that was whether you wanted to do the test or not, that was a test. In fact, that's the ultimate test, to actually get there in the real situation and see what happens.
Well, and then I wanted to overcome this. So my previous jobs, I'm a designer, so I'm always behind the computer. So I never present anything in other of my past jobs. But I got this job because I wanted to overcome this. So here I have to do small presentations twice a week. And then I have, in 2 weeks, I have somewhat of a bigger presentation. So I want to, continue doing these tests to see if I'm, doing better.
Well, yeah, but see, one of the nice things about a test, and I hadn't thought about it when we were talking, but let me mention it now so we can all learn. Well, let me ask you, when you went back to work and started talking and got this I'm feeling judged thing, okay, were you aware of any self-talk coming up? Anything that would point to a specific event? Something you are replaying at that moment to give you that feeling?
Yes, so I replay the specific event with the lunch lady. Remember that we talked about?
Yes.
And mainly I focus on that I'm going to make the mistakes, that I'm going to start rambling and mispronounce, but it all goes back to that event because she was the one that pointed it out that I couldn't explain myself.
Okay. All right. So, in fact, I think you and I deal with the lunch lady thing ourselves?
Yes.
Didn't we do that ourselves? Okay. All right. And so, if I recall it right, we did that. We did our optimal EFT thingy with the unseen therapist and all that. And all seemed to be well.
Right. It seems to come back. Yeah.
Okay.
It's resolved and then it comes back. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's coming back the way you're describing it now. It's coming back in a way that is saying, at least to me in my experience, that there's something about that lunch lady thing and what she said. There's something deeper there that we haven't gotten to. It seemed like, that's the one where she said this thing to you, and et cetera. But now, here's one of the beautiful things about testing, and this is one of the more advanced things, and thank you, Sandra, okay? So, if we're dealing with a specific event, seems to go away but keeps showing up, for some reason, there's something else. And typically, it is more foundational, meaning it's farther back in time. There was something in childhood, I don't know what it would be at this point, okay? But there was something maybe back in childhood where when this lunch lady said this thing to you, what it really did was trigger that thing once, back there. And that exaggerated that, and then off you go, okay? Mm-hmm. So we may or may not be able to get to that today, but let me ask you, if there was something underneath that, something that lunch lady thing is bouncing off of in the past, what could it be? Does anything come to mind?
Well, so the event with the lunch lady was when I was 5. So before that, I have very overprotective parents. So they didn't let me, deal with the world or, go out and talk to people. So I never had that, contact or interaction with people. So I was always afraid. Mm-hmm.
So you're always even before the lunch
talking to people. Mm-hmm.
Even before the lunch lady thing, you were having fears of talking to people.
Right, I was embarrassed to have.
Oh, okay. Well, is that not a clue that there's something more foundational underneath all this than just the lunch lady thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, and we don't have time to do it here, Sandra, but let me point you in a direction and so others can hear and learn from this. Now we go back to this sheltered or protected childhood when parents, I don't know what they would say to you, but something like, don't do this or this will happen. I'm making that up, okay? Mm-hmm. But the young child picks up all of this stuff. Oh, if I do this, this will happen. I'll be afraid. And that builds within you this bit about, if I speak out someplace, something's going to happen, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, that's just me sort of rambling here for a minute. Am I on target someplace? Anything specific come up?
Well, I remember that my mom told me that, so I was in the U.S. until I was 1, and I was starting to walk, and then went back to South America, and I couldn't walk again. I forgot how to walk. So she said that it felt like I was very embarrassed of people looking at me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, to me, that is more foundational than the lunch lady thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we understand that. Now, understand that we are assistants here to the unseen therapist. That's a very important thing to understand, okay? Mm-hmm. So something apparently has gone on way back in the... And your parents, I'm sure, were very loving and meant well and everything else, but what they embedded, what you picked up from that was, oh my gosh, it's not a safe world out there.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, why would my parents always be protecting me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just made that up because it just occurred to me. Is that on target?
Yes.
Okay. I'm imagining, I'm wondering, I'm thinking that the unseen therapist just gave me that. Okay. It's just sort of a summary of what we said, but I just said that in that fashion. My parents have protected me. It's an unsafe world out there, including people judging you. Okay. So, and now you replay that in the lunch lady thing and stuff even currently.
Right. And also what happened is, so I moved back to the US, some time ago, and leaving my parents, that they're the people that protect me the most, I ended up having rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I left my country and my parents, and 2 weeks before that, I started having symptoms. Mm-hmm.
And how is the rheumatoid arthritis now?
It's fine, but I control it with food.
Oh, so you have to watch your diet, otherwise you have symptoms.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, isn't this wonderful? You have enough conversations with people and stuff just starts coming out. And
yeah.
Some of you listeners may be thinking, well, how do I know to ask those questions Gary's asking and stuff like that? Because you're a newbie at it. Well, you know that because you get on these webinars and you read the materials and you start to gain experience like this. And once you start to gain the experience, it's like the snowball rolling down the hill. You don't have to add any more snow to it. It does it by itself. It's just experience gives experience gives experience. Okay. So anyway, so now it could be, speculates Gary, that the cause of your rheumatoid arthritis has to do with the protectionism of your parents, better stated, your response to the protectionism of your parents once upon a time. Okay.
Yes.
Well, okay. So, it wouldn't surprise me to learn as you start unraveling the protection things and what the parents said and all of that, and start getting to the point where, well, but by the way, this is not necessarily a safe world. We're not saying the world's a safe world, okay? In this illusionary safe world, we all die, okay? So it's not a safe world, and there are accidents and all kinds of stuff. But we can be over the top about it too, and get to the point where it's so unsafe we can't even talk to business coworkers, So okay. Does that help?
Yes. So I'm going to work on prior specific events. Mm-hmm.
All right.
With my parents.
And of course, you can test by going back.
Right.
Well, you can test two ways now. You can test by going back to, your coworkers, and you can start seeing what happens when you change your diet.
Right.
That doesn't mean for you to start adding sugar and tobacco now. Okay.
No, but I see that it's coming because I've been in remission for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
But now it's getting a little bit, I don't know why, the end of the year and until like this time of year, I have like flare-ups. So, but right now I'm doing okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. However, any kind of physical ailment, whether it be flare-ups or I don't care what it is, or a red spot on your leg, okay, any kind of physical ailment is a clue to unresolved emotional stuff within. It's a clue. And in fact, the way we're approaching everything, that's the cause. Okay. So we want to get to the cause. We did one other thing I want to talk about here for everybody. And that is this idea of the bee in the nose. Remember that?
Yes.
Now, most people, this was a metaphor that I brought up years ago when we were doing tapping and so on, to help some ladies, some clients understand, if you will, about judgment. Okay. By the way, before I get to that, there's no way on this planet that anybody is ever going to avoid judgment. Everybody is, as we were just now talking, Sandra, 50 some odd people were listening in and they were all judging you, every single one of them. Some of them may say, oh, how brave she is to talk about this. Some of them may say, oh, I'm glad she said that because that reminds me of this. Some may say, well, to something you wouldn't like, they may say, well, who's this lady? I mean, all of that goes on all the time, okay? Everybody is judged, unless, of course, you don't think you judge. Anybody here who doesn't judge, please write me a letter and tell me how you've gotten through life without judging. You do it constantly. It's part of the separated process. It's what we do that keeps us thinking that we are separated, because we have to judge everything out there that we're separate from. But anyway, okay, so the idea of the bee in the nose. I want to talk about the bee in the nose. Okay, it's a metaphor. It's a form of reframe that anybody can use if you want to, and when the circumstances present. And by the way, Sherry, please, if you have comments on all this when I finish, let me know. Now, the bee in the nose, the metaphor goes like this. Imagine two people, two students in the same class, same topic. They're going to take the same test. They have the same IQs. They both have studied for the test, and they both know the subject cold. Okay? So they walk into the classroom with everything being the same, except for one thing. One of them has a bee in their nose, buzz, going constantly buzzing in their nose. Okay. Now, the question I would ask of everybody is, who is likely to get the best answer on that test? And of course, the answer is, and Sandra gave me this answer, it would be the person without the bee in their nose. Okay. So, and the parallel to that is when people are like public speaking or speaking, etc., like Sandra was talking about, what's really going on is, metaphorically speaking, she has a bee in her nose. That bee is saying, people are judging, people are judging, people are judging, people are judging, people are judging. It's going like that, okay? And it's distracting her, so she can't take her test as well as she might, okay? This happens a lot, and it isn't the fact that she's less intelligent. It isn't the fact that she's necessarily less prepared. It isn't any of those things, other than the fact that she's got this bee in her nose talking, in this case, as we're now discovering, about her, either her lunch lady thing, or her bullying, or her protective parents, or something. That bee in the nose is going on, saying, you're being judged, you're being judged, you're being judged, you're being judged. And it gets in the way, even a normal conversation. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's a metaphor you might use. Thoughts, Sandra? Any more?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Sherry, anything from you?
Well, Gary, as you say, we all judge, and we're all being judged at all times. So when I think of the times where I've given talks in front of groups, I'm aware of the concept that Unseen Therapist will do her part when we do our part. And my part is to prepare for the talk and to be as knowledgeable as I can on the subject that I'm going to speak about. And once I've done my homework and I am as knowledgeable as I can be, I show up for the talk and I say, Unseen Therapist, take this talk and do with it as you wish. I've done my part, and now I wish to be a vessel through which you can speak and say whatever needs to be said. And I then do the talk, and sometimes I say what I think I'm going to say, and sometimes some weird stuff comes out. And then I'm content, knowing I'm being judged. I'm at a peace with the fact I've done everything I know to do. So if some people like it, they don't like it, they thought I was too much over here, or I said too much of that. You just have to be at peace with the fact that you're going to be judged no matter what, but you've done everything you know how to do. You've asked that the highest guidance guide you when you're out there giving your talk, and then just try to be at peace with whatever happens, knowing there are always going to be people who like you, who don't like you, who didn't understand something, whatever it is. That's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, Sherry, thank you so much. Let me move on here to Russell.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Good, yes. And Russell, tell me, what time is it? You're in Australia?
Oh my God, it's 6:15 now in the morning.
So you got...
I'm hanging in there.
You got up early to do this. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my God. No, I want to thank you both, you and Sherry. Thank you so much for all the hard work you put into this stuff. It's really appreciated.
Okay, so you sent me a sort of a generalized question area, including, I don't seem to be able to use the unseen therapist on either my issues or my clients. So you're coming from I believe, a newbie place?
Yes, absolutely new.
Right.
Yeah.
So why don't you speak for the newbies out there, okay? And rather than go into what you wrote here, why don't you just say what the issues are or what you see, and let us kind of respond to that at this point. Go ahead.
Okay. I've been using the EFT tapping aspect of the work for about 2 years. I work as a counsellor in a jail, so I've been kind of using tapping with my clients with very good results. With the Optimal EFT, I struggle to get beyond I can get quiet, I can get into a loving place. I can do those two things, but I can't seem to be able to apply the unseen therapist to a specific event, either for myself or a client. For example, if I uncover that a client has a specific event like a trauma from childhood, I don't quite know what to do with that then.
Well, let's start with that.
That makes sense.
Well, let's start with that. You got this client. I gather somebody in the prison?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have this client. We don't need to mention people's names and stuff like that, but we can just talk about the issues themselves. So you got the client, and you said you ended up with a specific event and didn't know what to do. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the specific event?
I mean, one person I can think of, he was abused as a child in terms of his mother would make him stand against the wall all day, facing the wall, and he wasn't allowed to speak or to move. That, for example, was one of the events. So I kind of went quiet at home after. I went quiet, I got into a loving place. I tried to get to this oneness place. It was me against the wall. But then I didn't know what to do. I seem to have a block in terms of what to do then, in terms of, because I care deeply about them. So the love aspect is there in terms of my compassion, but then I don't know what to do next.
Okay. All right.
That makes sense. I don't know.
No, yeah, but I always want to make sure we're clear in the communication, so I'm going to feed stuff back to you. So you learned of this specific event from your client in the prison setting.
Yeah. You
went home and tried to do this surrogate. You were going to do it, become him, and do it for him. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a reason why you wouldn't do that with him in the prison setting? Too many people around, or? Because I'm new to this, I'm not yet ready to, I don't think, to talk about this kind of work with them. The spiritual kind of work?
Yes.
Okay.
The tapping stuff I've got no problems with, because I've had so many good results with them, with the tapping. They love that. But this seems to be, I'm too new, I feel, to be able to talk about it like that.
Okay. This is a confidence or a trust type issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've addressed that before. And that takes experience, et cetera. And so my hat's off to you. I mean, anybody who will go into the prison setting, and I've been there myself. I've been into a handful of prisons, and believe me, those guys in there, in the main, are there because of traumatic events they've had, typically from childhood on. They've never known how to handle it, how to be in society. They've created their crimes, and so on. Okay. So, I mean, does that reflect your experience? I mean,
totally.
Okay. So they have all my compassion. A lot of people say, "Oh, they're in prison, forget them." Not to me. And my hat's off to you. These are our brothers and sisters, if you will, and they have not had the privileges others people have had. Yes, they've gone over the line, and yes, some for society's good need to be there, and so on. But they need help, big time. Okay, so you go in, you do the tapping with them. They're getting results. I gather you get to their specific events, do you?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the more efficient way of going about it. And as a result, they get freer and freer on certain issues. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now the only thing, the major piece left, if you want to bring a higher level into this, is a spiritual thing, and you're not comfortable yet. They may not be comfortable with it. They may judge you. Would I be right there?
Oh, sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. And nobody likes to be judged in that way, especially if you're there and in somewhat of a therapeutic or even authoritative position. You don't want to be judged like that. You need to keep the rapport and everything else. So, okay, that's just me rambling a bit.
But Gary, I can't just say, sorry, that I do have the courage now to speak to them about their true essence, which is love. I do talk about love with them. And no one's ever said to me that's bullshit, that they all kind of get that.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Because I was also going to say with the prisoners, we tend to think the same way with war veterans. We tend to think, oh, they don't have a spiritual side. Not true. Not true. They have as much a spiritual side as anybody else. And you can plug into it with them. Many of them that are in prison feel massively guilty for what they have done as a, is an affront to God. Okay, feel guilty because of that. No, they have this. So yes, you can do that. So what you might want to, I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts. One of the things is to find one of the prisoners in there that you think you could most easily line up with and say, hey, I just want to experiment with something. See, that's a way to kind of pre-frame this. It's an experiment. You could even lean on me and say the founder of this thing has been finding, if we get to the spiritual end of things, which I know you, prisoner Joe, you tend to believe in, that we could get even better results. Okay? So I'm a beginner at it, says Russell. So why don't we are you willing to practice it and see? Now that's a way to get into it, isn't it?
Yes.
Would that work with one or more of the?
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Okay. So now you can start practicing with the one inmate, or maybe two, or three, or whatever. And as you begin to get results with that, and as they begin to get enthusiasm, then it can start to spread, among the others by word of mouth, and then you can start building out. Now, the other thing I'd suggest is as you're home doing this surrogately, and you're quiet, and you get to the loving place, and then you said you imagine yourself standing against the wall like the one prisoner said, the one client said, and then you don't know what to do. That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I would do if I'm there. First of all, I'm standing against the wall. I'm imagining myself to be prisoner Joe. Okay. And I'm standing against the wall. I'm young. I've been abused by my parents, and I have to do this. I've had to do it many times, probably. Okay. But I'm imagining this, and I'm imagining, and this you may have to get from more conversations with him, I'm imagining my response to it, meaning my emotional response to it. Am I angry at this? Do I feel guilty because I've participated in something? Do I have fear of something? If I don't stand here if I don't stand here all the time, I'm going to get whipped or beaten or something. Okay. What is my emotional? What's really going on with me at that point? That's what I would bring an unseen therapist for. Remember, when we do specific events, it's the time when, who did what, and the emotion that I felt. Okay. So the time when is when I the time when is when I did something and I had to stand against the wall. Who did what? My parents or somebody forced me there. Okay.
Yeah.
And my emotion was, okay, then get into your emotion in his behalf. Let unseen therapists come in with that. Now, I'm going to guess it was guilt for something that they did. Okay. So as they look back at it now, and after all this is done, whatever it was they did, chances are the guilt's not going to be quite what it was. Okay. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect because you're not there to get all the different details of it, etc. But chances are you can take the edge off this presumed guilt. But that's what you would do. Okay. Questions beyond that?
I get stuck about the actual. I understand everything you're saying. The actual process. If I'm as him now, feeling the fear or the guilt or whatever, do I just whatever comes to mind in terms of images, in terms of the unseen? Because that's where I get stuck on what to actually think of.
Yes, thank you, and I get that question a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
I see two avenues. Sherry may have more on this, but I see two avenues. Okay, one is I create myself some metaphors. And I often will tell the client to use these metaphors to use, which is the metaphors of how we can envision the unseen therapist doing their job. For example, if I'm imagining guilt, I can call it a red ball. It is a red throbbing ball, maybe located in the head, maybe located in the heart area or stomach or something. It's a red, throbbing guilt bar. That's the issue, okay? And then I'm imagining unseen therapists in the form of a light, cooling waterfall that comes over the red ball, and the red ball becomes less throbbing, and the red leaves, and it becomes pink, and finally dissolves and disappears, okay? Now, that's my metaphor for doing it, and a lot of clients like to use that. It's a very simple metaphor, and it fits for lots and lots and lots of things, so use it. The other thing that you will do as you get more and more experience with this is you won't use the metaphor. Doesn't mean you can't use the metaphor, but sometimes you won't use the metaphor. And you will just let your mind wander and let unseen therapist do her own metaphor. And I've seen some really clever things come up, you know. It floats off into all kinds of different stuff, you know. And I never know for sure if it's me making it up or if it's her, but I'm more and more inclined to think it's mostly influenced by the unseen therapist. But, you know, these other creative things, you know, come on in. Now, does that help?
Yes.
The throbbing ball metaphor alone is so universally useful that I would think that alone would help, and then you can graduate from there. Yes?
Yeah. And if I'm working with them in the room, would they find their own metaphor, or do I give them that metaphor for them to also imagine?
I would give them the metaphor, but as time goes on, think of other metaphors. Let them think of metaphors. Or they may even tell you, "Oh, well, you know, I would rather see a crying baby being kissed by God." Okay. Now I just made that up out of the blue. I've never used it. Okay. But that's the kind of thing that can come up. You know, being wrapped in a blanket of love would be another metaphor. You know, I just do lots of things.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's because I'm so new. It all feels very heady. Do you know what I mean? And not from the heart. That's kind of what I'm very new. That's the thing. That's why I think.
Well, yeah, and it's bound to be that way because it's unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar. But the mere fact that you can. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, what is your view? I mean, if you and I are in the same room, and you had some kind of an issue, and God showed up, could God fix the issue?
Of course. Okay.
Well, there you are. What we're doing is we're bringing God into the picture. We're not perfect at it by any means. We are still climbing our stairway to miracles. But we brought God into the picture now in the form of unseen therapists.
Yeah.
To do this. And so it's a matter of, yes, it's heady. Yes, it's strange. Yes, it's out there until you start getting results, and then it starts to come more in here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, does that do it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, before I let you go, Sherry, you have anything?
Yes, I just wanted to point out, maybe not just to Russell, but for many people who have Russell's same issue, our lower self, our ego, loves to complicate. It loves procedures and structure and rules and processes. And really, unseen therapist, in truth, as Gary pointed out, is, ultimate simplicity. It's more about deepening your connection with your highest guidance, not so much about getting the process and procedures down. The deeper your connection with her, the less you have to wonder, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
The more you just go in and let her tell you, do we use a metaphor that I'm going to drop into your head? Or do you just invite her in to resolve it, and then an interesting metaphor will come to you or to the other person? And sometimes, I'll say what dropped in, and they'll say, wow, I love that. Because that happened to me years ago, and I really relate to me being on a bicycle or whatever it is. So I don't try to figure anything out when I do a round of optimal EFT. Sometimes I'll just hear, why don't you use this metaphor? They may need a little help. And sometimes I say, we're just going to invite unseen therapist in, or in your case, we're going to invite love in, since they understand love is their essence. And you can point out how powerful love is. You don't have to say it's God or unseen therapist, and just, you know, go into that loving space and allow love to heal. Because simplistically, that's what heals, is love. It's not any big rocket science kind of thing.
Absolutely right. I agree totally. Yeah.
Yeah, just be quiet, and whatever you feel so moved intuitively to do, to either come up with a metaphor or to allow one to drop in, you'll just know, Russell, and in time, you'll just trust that knowing is going to be there.
And to begin with, though, I don't think you'll always, at least when I started, I didn't always know. Yes, eventually you get to the point where you know. And I don't know that you will always, if you don't use a metaphor of your own, like the throbbing ball, if you don't interject one, I don't know that you'll necessarily get a metaphor from unseen therapists. Sometimes I just get really quiet with a client. We just get quiet, and I ask the client oftentimes is to break the silence whenever it seems we're done. And the client will break the silence. I didn't get any metaphors. You know, I just imagined some stuff and things like that. But then I'll test it with the client. I'll say, okay, now go back to that issue and tell me on a scale of 0 to 10, are you still an 8 on the anger? And they'll go back and they'll say, no, I'm not even sure I can find the event. Okay. Did something happen? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Something very important happened. So it doesn't always just fall right into place with bullet points, you know, A, B, and C. You know, there's an art to this. But again, the art takes practice. Okay. Russell, I want to thank you for getting up so early in the morning in Australia. I want to thank you for your service with our prisoners.
Thank you.
Very necessary. Very necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Sherry, what time is it?
It is 2:34. Oh, my time. 3 hours earlier for
that's
you.
okay. That's okay. That tells me. Okay. So we've been here an hour and a half. Okay.
Yeah.
I have more here. But I think at the moment, what I would like to do is to close this. We will, those of you who have written in, we will discuss some of this we've already discussed with you, okay, and individually. But I will bring these up next time. We will do another question and answer next time, and any more questions that you have, please ask me, because I want to do them in detail if we can. So I will see you next time. Hugs to everybody. Thank you, Sherry. Kiss, kiss. Bye-bye.